Hey guys, welcome to Hope Rescue Podcast. It's Kimberly and Tim Scott, and we back.
We're back.
We're back.
Yeah.
How do you say that? There's like from a movie. And we're back.
I don't know. That sounds like a preacher.
Help me, Sophie.
We're back.
I'm asking. No, it's like an SNL thing. I think.
Okay, I don't
And
even.
we're back.
Baby's got back. I don't know. No, that's
wow,
different.
that's a whole different show.
Is that a different one? Yeah, all right.
Anyway, so this is our final show on boundaries, which
It
we've been
is.
doing through the month of July. Kind of sad to be, ending one, but exciting to be starting another one next week. But
Yep.
it's been a good series, and we've gotten some great feedback. And I just noticed between the two of us, we look very military.
We're going for that.
Yeah,
look.
you're wearing navy. I'm wearing like green, and I feel like we should salute the flag.
I want to do it right now. Where's the flag?
God bless America,
You know it.
people.
All right.
So we're diving in today on the boundaries topic, but what we're going to do is talk about the two types of boundaries and how to implement them and define who goes in what category. But I want to start by reading a passage out of Mark 6:31, and that'll be kind of our anchor verse in launching into this episode. So here we go. Mark 6:31, it says, "And he said to them," he being Jesus, correct?
Right.
Said, "Come away by yourselves to a secluded place and rest a while. For there were many people coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat." So this is Jesus in his own voice basically saying, let's set up a boundary here.
Yeah.
Let's fuel ourselves.
I had a professor in seminary say about this verse, so dumb and cheesy, but I remember it, and that is, "Come apart and rest a while, or you will come apart."
Oh, that's good though.
Yeah,
I like that.
I'm not a cliche guy, you know.
Yes.
In fact, I hear pastors do cliches, and I go, "Okay, really?"
Cringe.
I'm not a cliche guy. I
Yeah.
like good, solid truth that.
But that's truth in a sentence. That's
Yeah,
a sermon in a sentence
But
right there.
there it is, and I'm sure he wanted to do that. I think he preached it. But anyway, this idea that people's demands on your life, and this when we talk about creating boundaries, one of the struggles I've had as a pastor is that somebody has a need, I feel obligated to that need. And so there are people that need help, but I can't help every person. And I love what Andy Stanley said. He says, "Do for one what you wish you could do for all."
I love that.
Isn't that a good?
That's one of my favorite
That's
quotes.
a cliche.
Yeah.
It's
No,
that
but
good.
it's truth.
Yeah. But it is. It's powerful. That think about that. Everybody goes, "Well, I can't meet all these needs of
Yeah.
all these
They get overwhelmed.
at-risk families, and what am I going to do?" Well, just deal with one.
Right.
Do for one what you wish you could do for all. Anyway, this idea that the needs of people demands on the disciples based on the needs of the people does not obligate the disciples to act upon that. And I think that's what a lot of people in ministry, therapists, social workers, you see this a lot where people go, "Well, they need this, so I'm going to give it to them." Well, how do we restrict that? And that's what boundaries are all about.
Yeah, and I feel like in the scripture, it is a sermon in a sentence in its own way, because basically he's saying, don't abandon your self-care for the needs of so many clamoring after you.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to remember is that we have to sometimes put ourselves in that place of a first priority.
Like if I was going to put it in a sermon in a sentence, I'd say, "Come apart and rest a while, or you'll come apart."
That's so good.
It's so good.
Why didn't I think of
I
that?
could be a seminary professor. Not a good one, just one. Anyway, he was good, by the way. But okay, so let's talk about the two kinds of boundaries. So you got, we talked about the team concept last week, and hopefully you've had an opportunity to go to our website, look at that chart about that team concept and creating margin and so forth in your life. But when we talk about boundaries, back to boundaries, boundaries are where you're setting restrictions on other people. Margin is where you're setting restrictions on your own time. But I want to talk about this idea of boundaries from two perspectives. What I call flexible boundaries and then rigid boundaries. So if you have people in your life that are really toxic, and we talked about in week
Extreme
2, we
versions,
talked about toxic.
yes.
We talked about gaslighting. What was that in week 3 of this series? It's really important for you to understand those people that are having a very unhealthy impact in your life. One of the things I'll say before we get to this is boundaries, I think, has been created in modern pop psychology to be about self-love. That if you love yourself, you will do this. That's not how I see it. I see it as self-respect.
That's
So
good.
there's a difference between self-love and self-respect. Yes, we love ourselves, but do we respect ourselves? If you respect yourself, then even if somebody won't respect your time, you respect your time and you limit their access to that time. So I think the key is not, I mean, there's so much to do about self-love. It almost becomes narcissistic where we're just self-obsessed. And I don't think that's what they mean, but that's kind of an unintended consequence to that. So let's talk more about self-respect. If you respect yourself, and you're in a relationship with somebody who is very negative, you have got to create boundaries, rigid boundaries. But what about the people that are not toxic? They're not gaslighting you. They're not manipulating you. They just, like what Jesus said, come apart from these people. They're good people. You love them. I love them. But you need to rest.
Rest and eat.
Yeah, rest and eat. So how do you distinguish between those? So what I call level 1 boundary is the flexible, and then the level 2 boundary is the rigid. Why don't we go through those together?
So the level 1 is basically set up for those who are healthy, people in your life that are basically healthy and they have their needs are manageable in your life. So that would be the level 1 boundary. And the level 2 is
well, just to clarify that, they're easy to negotiate with.
Right.
When you are in a relationship, what did you made a statement in this series, and it was something about people that don't like your boundaries or people that are something. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah, the people who will struggle most with you having boundaries are the people who benefited from you having none.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
So when you have people in your life that are healthy, relatively normal people, you can negotiate with them.
Yes.
But on the rigid boundary, it becomes what?
Right. And non-negotiable
Yeah.
and difficult and intolerable and just the opposite. So the healthier ones are negotiable, they're tolerable, they are reasonably sacrificial, they have healthier needs, they are productive people in your life, and they're not compromisers.
So a tolerable situation is someone that has a genuine need for your help.
Right.
A intolerable on the rigid side, an intolerable person is someone who is demanding even when they don't have a need. They want your time.
Right.
I've had people
life suckers.
I call them, this is what well, this is harsh. I'm going to say it anyway. All right. So they're like, I met this person. It was a woman. All right, whatever. I met this woman and I dated her very briefly. It was the coffee date and out.
Oh, yes, I've heard this story.
Yeah, coffee date and out. And just talking to her, I could tell she was very bitter, without getting into detail, very bitter.
Tell us everything, Tim.
Well, anyway.
Like everything.
So I realized she's not going to be the one for me.
Within about 30 seconds, right?
It wasn't 30 seconds. It was pretty fast. I figured it out. But the whole date lasted 50 minutes. I remember well.
Yes, I remember you said you timed it because it was such torture.
Well, I had to get out. I could tell it would be inappropriate to say the things that bugged me, which were very shallow on my part. But
it wasn't a good fit.
Had to do with her jewelry. I'll just say that. Her jewelry was wow.
So weird.
I'm going farther than I wanted to. Anyway, so this guy said he met her and he goes, "Hey, I want to date her." And I couldn't help myself before I could stop myself. I said, "Dude, she is the black hole of relationships.
Yes.
She is going to suck the life source out of your being." And he kind of already liked her. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what have I done? Anyway.
Now they've been married for 17 years.
Yeah. And he has no life. She's wonderful. Anyway, that intolerable demand upon your life that it's like, I cannot get away from this person. The flexible is, as you mentioned, reasonable sacrifice.
Yes. But
somebody that's saying, I need this, and you go, okay, I can give you an hour.
Yeah.
So here, I learned this a long time ago, and I don't always follow it. When somebody comes into my office, I will talk forever because that's the most important person to me in the world at that moment.
Right.
Something about God has gifted me that way or made me that way. The person I'm talking to is the most important. Unless they have weird jewelry, we've already established. But
now you made
anyway,
me nervous.
So
I'm gonna go check my accessory drawer.
You ever notice the jewelry I bought you? Have bought you?
Oh, which
that'd
piece?
be none.
I was going to say, which one of the three?
Anyway, so anyway.
Oh, we just burned each other.
Yeah, I was sad.
Oh,
it was
honey,
sad.
I
Let's
love
go to
my wedding
therapy.
ring.
Yeah, you chose it.
My wedding ring.
So anyway, all right. So they what was I saying? I got confused.
The most important person in the room.
Yeah. So I want to give them maximum amount of time, and I will actually talk to somebody that needs counseling or encouragement, spiritual advice for a couple of hours.
Yeah.
Easy. So I always have to say when people come in, look, we need to be done at this time. And then I kind of watch that time. But if I try to get out later on, it feels like I'm cutting them short. So one of the ways to deal with people who have reasonable needs is to tell them up front, I need to be done by 1 o'clock. And if you're starting at 11, that's a long time. So to just give them kind of set the boundary up front so that it's not get
just
awkward
say I
later.
need to be done by.
Yeah.
You don't have to explain why. I need to be
exactly.
done by.
And I think what was the old saying? You said no is a complete sentence.
No is a complete sentence.
And
exactly.
sometimes we go, I can't. I'm sorry because of this and that. You know what? You don't have to tell them all that. Sometimes for reasonable people, you just say,
and they get it.
What
they're
about
reasonable.
if they're unhealthy? They're asking for an unhealthy sacrifice. You have to be rigid in that boundary.
You say, I will give you 30 minutes, and every minute past that, I will key your car an extra inch.
Yeah, wow. Okay, that's the violent woman there. She doesn't mean it, I hope, because I have a nice car out there. So when someone is, let's just drop to the last idea of this no compromising.
Right.
They are.
You're talking about healthy or unhealthy?
Yeah. So for the person that is flexible, you don't have to compromise. Whereas with a person, when you have when you have a rigid boundary,
the more rigid you have to respond.
Well, and you can't compromise your values, who you are.
Yeah.
So women or men that are asked to do things that are outside of their value system by their partner, that's irresponsible. You need to have a rigid boundary. So all of this comes down to, you really need to understand it. You don't just have one kind of boundaries. You have different kinds of people in your life. We talked about people out for your win, and then the people that are for their own win or somebody else's win. You have to have different sets of boundaries for them. Some are flexible, some are rigid. So keeping that in mind.
Yes.
So I kind of wanted to transition away from that and talk a little bit about terms of reconciliation, because one of the things that I've talked about in relationships that have had a breach of trust is that they need to create terms of reconciliation. And what those are usually are non-negotiables. So we deal with couples all the time on this. We've done it many times where we say, you need to say, what is a non-negotiable term in your relationship? No, you cannot cheat on me ever again. For example, you might say, I need a non-negotiable for someone who has been cheating on their spouse. You would say, I need to have no secrecy. I need to have access to your phone. I need to have access to your schedule. And you say, well, that's unfair. Well, I guess what? You're in a committed relationship and you have cheated on your husband or wife. You need to give them access so that you don't hide anything. You need that accountability.
The whole point of non-negotiables are, you say you want to be in this relationship. You express that you want me in your life. These are the ways that this can be possible.
Right.
It's not what you can't do. It's really if you want to engage in this relationship. And this is even for people in regards to the boundaries. This is a form of boundary. If you want to have another opportunity at a relationship, this non-negotiable list is a way for, it's an opportunity. And if you don't follow the list, then clearly it's not motivated by love or a true desire to stay in that relationship.
So if you don't have a committed relationship, you can just walk away.
Right.
If it's a casual friendship, the person is annoying, you walk away. But in marriage, we are committed in raising children or parents. That's a committed relationship. Employee, employer, that's a committed relationship. So when you have these committed relationships, what you need to think in terms of is, how do I negotiate reconciliation? Because reconciliation, restoration is always the goal when there's been a breach.
Right.
Now, let's kind of switch from that and let's talk about when you are considering a committed relationship. So if you're considering a committed relationship, we need to ask a few questions about this committed relationship. So, for example, we need to ask these following questions. The first one is this best use of my time? So somebody said, hey, I get asked this. I just recently was asked to teach in a college environment. I used to teach. I used to be a professor, and I was asked to teach, and I really prayed about this, and I thought, is this the best use of my time? And I actually ran it by you, and you said, what better use of your time would be than that?
Yes,
influencing leaders for the
upcoming
future.
leaders, yeah.
And it would like hit me. Yes, I have time for that.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. You know this. Our middle son, Malachi, came to me and he said, hey, Dad, we go to this church now. They go to the main campus of the church we work at.
East Lake Church, Chula Vista, represent.
Represent, yeah. So we're all the way up in La Jolla. It's a long way to drive. All of our kids live in South Bay. So, but we speak up there quite often at Torrey Pines. And so, we can't get there all the time. He said, I really miss your Bible teaching. And he said, would you be willing to lead a Bible study? And the first flash in my mind was, I don't know if I have time for that. And of course, the second flash was, I have to make time for that.
Yes.
And here we are with a few young men that I love and care
10,
about.
8 to 10.
Yeah, not that many.
If everybody shows.
Yeah, if everybody shows like 8 to 10 guys, yeah. But pouring into their lives.
Like sons, yeah.
Yeah, it's just a powerful thing. So you ask yourself, is this the best use of my time? If you want to get in a committed relationship, so when we think about boundaries, think about, am I committed to this? The second one is to ask this question.
Wait, I feel like we didn't finish that thought properly.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
I just want to say that in conclusion about that, you recognized that. In fact, I remember you saying the night after your first night, you said, you know what? I realized tonight this may be one of the most important things I ever get to do.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
And so that's why it's important in relationship to setting boundaries or not, is that you do take a minute and breathe and pray about it before you make a commitment and allow the Holy Spirit to speak to you, because it may be what you see as possibly an insignificant thing or another thing to add to your calendar, when really the Lord's saying, this is one of the highest values I have for you right now. Right. So we can't be so rigid on our boundaries that we don't take a minute to actually process and go through, is this the Lord? Is this just me? Like, you need to just step back and consider.
Earlier in this, I think the first week we talked about, excuses for not doing it. Am I just being lazy? And that's why I'm creating, I create boundaries on everybody. So I don't have to do anything. But really, and you're right. And it is so powerful to me. When I walk away from that Bible study on Wednesday nights, I'm just like, wow, I love these guys, and I want them to know truth. And I don't even know if they know what's going to happen to them if they stick with us, which I'm pretty sure they will. I don't think they know what's going to happen to them in the growth of truth in their life. Yeah. So anyway, ask yourself that question. The second question is this.
Is this something only I can do? In other words, am I the only person that can meet this need, or is there somebody else that can do that as well?
Yeah, and maybe along with that, am I the best person?
Right.
So you think about the statement. I'm trying to remember the statement. It goes something like this. do only what you can do. And when you're thinking about leadership, you're thinking about purpose and, time allotment in your life. Are you wasting time on things that other people could do, maybe better than you? But this question is this something only I can do? Am I the best person to do this job?
Right.
And we really need to focus on that. You ask that question, it's going to narrow down where you create boundaries.
Right.
The third one is this: will this injure me emotionally or spiritually? So if I make a commitment to this, so as you know, and some of our listeners know, I work for several different companies that are, corporations. And, it's not a spiritual endeavor. Most of my life, well, for 20 years, I've been working with corporations, but sometimes I go, okay, I'm being asked to be on another board or be involved in another public held company. And I go, okay, is this going to be the best use of my time? But also, how is this going to impact me emotionally and spiritually?
Right.
Somehow in ministry, for those of us in ministry, and most of our listeners are not, professional pastors or whatever. Most of our listeners are in ministry as a layperson. And so we need to ask ourselves, what is the spiritual impact that is going to be on my life? Just because your church asks you to do it, and I am all about serving.
Yes.
But just because your church asks you to do it doesn't mean you need to do it. And just because somebody needs a third grade teacher doesn't mean you need to be the third grade teacher. That goes back to the second one. Is this something only I can do? I am gifted in certain areas. I am called to certain areas. I have a certain, as Rick Warren said, a shape, spiritual gifts, heart desire, ability. What's the next? P is personality, and E, experience. So that's kind of your shape. Is this the best use of my time? Is this where I belong emotionally and spiritually, going to be edifying to me and to others? And the fourth one is this:
can this be delegated to someone else? And so that's where you get into the weeds, because
that's been my hard one.
Even if it is a great fit for you, like you talked about, do I have room on my plate for this? And if I don't, can it be delegated to somebody who else can step up to the plate? So yeah,
it's really hard to let go of something. I'm a controller, so it's hard for me to. I mean, there are times when you're working on something like details, and I'll go, let me, and I start getting my hands in it before I have permission.
And then I shake them.
Yeah, they shank me in the side like we're in prison. Anyway, and you do that too sometimes, not as much.
Yeah, okay, I don't remember grabbing anything. Certainly not the remote control, because that's glued to your palm.
Well, yeah, the remote control does belong to me.
There's no doubt.
But there are times, let's put it this way, there are times when we're driving.
Yes, that's
and you're
true.
sitting in the
seat.
and
I'm so
you're trying to
guilty of
control.
that.
If you had a brake pedal and a gas pedal and a steering wheel, we would go your way because you are trying to control that. But anyway, this whole idea of really understanding delegation is a matter of releasing control, letting go.
Right.
So hard for me to do that. And I learned over the years the best way to get things done is to delegate. You will only have a sphere of influence that goes so far. And if you want to have a dynamic influence that goes far beyond your borders, you're going to delegate. That's why I love that Scripture says, the Psalm says, that children are heritage from the Lord. They're like arrows in the hands of a mighty man. So when you knock that bow with an arrow and you pull it back with all of your might, a mighty man, he says, you let it go. It goes far beyond the potential you have.
Yes.
And it's directed in the right way. I think that's the concept of delegation.
Yes.
In fact, life delegation is what child rearing is all about. So let's close with this one thing. And this is, I want to talk about learning to be assertive before aggression takes over. So if any of you lean passive aggressive, I think that gets thrown around a lot of times. Passive aggressive, like just an example. So your spouse wants you to do something. You kind of push back and say, no, I don't want to do it. And they say, we're going to leave at 3. And they just drive off without you. because they don't want to have that conflict. They are asserting their opinion through passive activity.
Sure.
That's passive aggressive. Kind of self evident what that means. But a lot of people that are passive don't like to assert themselves. And when you don't assert yourself, what happens is the emotions begin to boil. And the more they boil, then the assertiveness becomes aggression. And aggression is almost never positive. Most people who struggle with toxic emotions tend to move towards either silence or aggression. So they either sulk or they attack. And those verbal attacks can be, anywhere from, harsh words, denigrating words, pejoratives, cussing, whatever it is. But it is this crying out, and it's a very, very dangerous place to be, because what happens when we get overcommitted? We start to resent the people that asked for our involvement.
Sure, and that we agreed to be involved with. So that's the...
I watched my beloved mom, who is with the Lord now. She was pretty much a saint. However, I watched her do this all the time. She would commit to stuff. She'd get overcommitted, and then she'd be angry that she's doing all the work.
Yes.
And boy, I learned that from her, because I do the same thing. So it's really important before things get out of hand.
Dial it back.
And it's just like when someone comes, I mentioned this earlier in this podcast, when someone comes to you and says, hey, or you have a meeting for counseling, you need to set at the beginning of the meeting when the counseling session is over.
Yes.
When you have a strategy meeting with staff members at your work, maybe your employees or fellow workers, team members, or even your boss, to say, this is how much time I have, to say it up ahead of time, because then it begins to build as your time is beginning wasted more and more, and you want that event to stop.
Right.
And it's too late, so you just are harsh in your reaction. So obviously it's important to create boundaries, create margin. You create margin, again, that is you restricting your commitments to certain activities. You create boundaries, that is putting restrictions on other people's intrusion into your life. Hopefully this has been helpful.
This has been an awesome series.
Yeah.
I feel like I've learned a lot just in researching with you about it. But like I said, I wish that I would have had this given to me when I was much younger. And so my encouragement to you as our listening audience, for those of you even who are raising children, late elementary into junior high and high school, ask them to take a listen to this series, because honestly, equipping our kids and even sitting down and listening to it together will help equip them in their future relationships. And
Yes.
you can learn and grow with them if you feel stuck in this area. Like I had to discover these tools as a grown woman, as a single mom with children, honestly. And so I would just encourage you to see this as an opportunity to learn together. It's never too late to learn boundaries, and there's going to be missteps in the process. Sometimes it's messy, but it's worth doing.
Let me share two things real quick before we close. Number one, if you have gotten some value out of this, all of these are archived at our website. Go back, listen to these, have your friends, instead of sending them there, maybe it'd be valuable if you have a friend that you love that's going through a difficult time, maybe in a toxic relationship or whatever. Go through this and listen to it with them. Have a listening party. Maybe have some of your friends get together and listen to those. We don't mean to self-promote in that way, but if it can be helpful, I would encourage you to do it. So they're archived on our website at hoperescuepodcast.org.
Or tag a friend on social media, or send it to them, whatever you got to do.
And then the last thing before we go, and I only got a second, that is listen. You have an opportunity to ask questions of us, and we're going to send that out for you. If you have questions for us, send questions to us at hoperescuepodcast.org. We'd love to hear from you. God bless. Got to go.
Bye, guys.